development, a call to action for impact and sustainability. So please welcome our yes, Jeff Thompson. Please give me a round of applause. And Kathleen also please join them. That was good. I like it.
Right, thank you all very much for coming today, and thanks again to Gabriel, because I was there last year. It was amazing conversation, but I'm even more excited about that conversation today because the person next to me is amazing. And it's all good to talk about commercialization of sports on the African continent. It's even better to talk about impact and sustainability. And I think this is a very big aspect of the sports development. And so we've got Jeff Thompson today with us. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Jeff Thompson's a potential bad boy made good from the streets, East End of London, had sport, the arts and cultural activity as part of his mental, physical, emotional health and well-being. The challenges in life saw me have sport and the arts every day of my life, and I discovered the ability through participation to be able to compete. So from the streets to stadiums, back to the streets, where over the last 30 years, I've put back the 5 gold medals I won in karate, my chosen discipline. It was about the social, cultural and economic impact. So I am the most sustainable example of a 45, 47 year investment and the return that can be resulting in me in here talking to you rather than outside waiting for you.
Here you go. Right, I think I'm gonna give up the microphone. I'm gonna speak loud.
Sure.
Anyway, a lot of passion today in the conversation, so no doubt we'll be loud. So Jeff, could you just explain to me, to us, what inspired you to found the Youth Charter?
The Youth Charter was the result of almost 3 decades ago, post-apartheid South Africa, the new South Africa, and the vision for sport that would see South Africa take a new dawn and a new chapter as part of the global community. My competitive career had ended. I was now in sports administration and was asked to contribute to the vision for sport for the Rainbow Nation. You earlier heard from High Commissioner Malalambo of what role it played in the struggle, but this was about what the new chapter of the Rainbow Nation would look like, and a global bringing together of the sports development ecosystem actually convened in Johannesburg, and I presented a Youth Charter. The Youth Charter was born out of Manchester's bidding, hosting and legacy of major games, but it came out of the disaffection and disadvantage when you don't, I believe, have sport and the arts as a fundamental human right, that it can lead to a disaffection and disadvantage, can see the negative behavioural lifestyle influences of young people on our streets. A 14-year-old schoolboy was shot dead on the streets of Moss Side on January the 2nd, 1993, and that's when I became very conscious that the streets I'd come from had lost that opportunity. Geldof did it with the F word, I did it with please. 6'5", a pretty convincing, combative, medal-winning achievements, had everybody convene at Wembley, and within that we had a Youth Charter launched that was to provide young people with an opportunity to develop, not win. It was not about the winning, it was about the taking part. Within months we went to Johannesburg, the Lake Madiba, used sport in the arts as a vaccine and antidote to build a new South Africa, and Sport for Development was born. And for the last 3 decades, I've simply applied our 3-phased approach to engage young people, predominantly from disaffected disadvantage, through sport, art, culture and digital activity, to equip them with the mental, physical, emotional health and well-being, but thirdly and more importantly, empower them with an aspiration of further higher education, because that is the truest form and character, employability or entrepreneurship. That is the ecosystem in the round.
I think we've got Gabriel mic open. I don't know if you can close it because we can hear him. Or you can stop talking. Right, thanks Jeff. How do you address the challenges faced by the young people in disadvantaged communities locally and globally?
Well, I think if we look at the African continent, it is the most lucrative return on investment by way of raw human young talent. If we start with the Africa Cup of Nations at the beginning of this year, the Euros, the All Africa Games, which received no coverage. I don't think anyone even recognized it existed. Ghana did host the All Africa Games, but the legacy leading up to and including the Paris Games suggests to me that African talent is now being deployed or employed in every single major sporting event. At the Euros, we saw African diaspora featuring almost every European team, unheard of 20 years ago. At the AFCON, in effect, everything that African talent should be about by way of the global game, the beautiful, at times ugly game, because sport is a microcosm of society. It reflects it as well as influences it. But I believe an unprecedented year of sport has seen the African continent and the young talent, not only in the winning, but in the taking part. Imagine how many careers and entrepreneurial requirements there are to deliver a major games or a major sporting event. And that's why I believe there is a social, cultural and economic ecosystem that takes young talent, that is the youngest youth cultural talent in the global ecosystem, but bring it into a sustainable and I think impactful legacy opportunity for all.
Soccerwise has been a cornerstone of the youth charter initiatives. What do you see the most enduring legacy for young people in communities?
I think legacy is an overused word. For me, it's a generational thing. It would move from whatever. I remember the story in Robben Island where the National Sports Council of South Africa grew out of that football team, and with them then deciding how they would use sport to give them the freedom from apartheid that they sought. But football as the global game, the global ecosystem, the geopolitical importance of sport, major games and football in particular, is both the challenge and the opportunity. But it is worth remembering 99% of the talent comes from socioeconomically deprived backgrounds and disadvantage. Therefore, if, as the private sector and the capital assets, the investment, the long-term investment, sees social, cultural, and economic return, there are a number of footballers who all have their foundations. They all do philanthropy. But if you look at the geopolitical impact of the issues we face in our communities and in the African communities, because you only need to look at South Africa, 60% of young people are unemployed. That is not a healthy environment upon which to invest. So you have to start looking at not only what they do on the pitch, the services, the careers that can be realized off the pitch. And when we talk about major events, I'm not just talking about the medals that will be won, the points that will be taking a league to a cup, and the rights and the medium and selling of those rights, but it really is about the extended benefits, everything that revolves around it, everything that realizes a multi-trillion return on investment, because it really is about how that talent can find its way, find its place, whether it be a driver of a limousine service, whether it be the food concessions, whether it be the social media. And it is absolutely right in the point made earlier. Mobile phones are where young people get what they want to see. They are interactively active and actively interactive, but that has both a plus and a negative. We have to find ways upon which we can gainfully employ and see entrepreneurial, social, cultural, and economic impact. And that's why I believe that major games in particular, but the leagues we're talking about, the investment of the NFL, the NBA, are because the talent that looks like us in their societies are now looking at other means of using their creative and innovative ambition. They're not going to work as hard as my generation. They don't have to. For me, it was a passport. It was a way out. For a lot of the African nations, Eastern European nations, that's where the talent's coming from, because the social, cultural, and economic environments are challenging enough to create what I always look for and that psychometric tests cannot produce. that little talent and glint in their eye that tells me that they will realise their potential, because the secret to any winning success and formula, I'm afraid, is hard work. That smart hard work being applied to the streets are why I believe any talent that represents the diaspora, we're a migrating diaspora, the combat sports aren't being looked at. Why have we not had a world heavyweight championship bout on the African continent on the 50th anniversary of Rumble in the Jungle? I was inspired by Rumble in the Jungle. That's when I realised, when I watched the greatest, that I could achieve my heavyweight potential. Sport, as the continent now suggests, is the fulcrum of what the art of the possible can be. And I think it's the most exciting time, rather than Band-Aid suggesting there needs a Band-Aid of a sticky plaster, that we use the plaster of Paris to suggest that the return on investment is a sure and assured one.
In what way do you use sports, art and culture to create opportunity for education and employment to young people?
I think, again, a controversial point of note, but I helped inspire it. The Sport for Development movement is an industry. It should not be. It's a movement. It's a movement that provides a social and grassroots environment whereby, as that participation, strength and depth is created, the cream does rise to the top. We've come from those communities, by those communities, with those communities, but from community up sport for development, rather than third world aid down sport for development. That is what we currently have. A quarter of a century ago, the African nation and nations of historical third world existence, sport for development was a natural day-to-day existence. It was post-apartheid South Africa and the late President Mandela's wish to see sport as a means of creating a real significant change in the lives of South Africa, Africa, but the world, saw what we have now. But sport for development has to have a reset. And the only way you do that is to align it to what many are using, the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which I might add will not achieve their target for 2030 and mean nothing to the young people and lives of communities I engage with. So why don't we find a youth and community engagement model, a cultural framework, a measurable means of impact that gives the confidence of investment the short, medium and long-term return? So that's what we did. We just created a community campus. Universities use it, they have that long-term presence. They are going to recruit, hopefully, the educational talent and potential and retain it. We need to retain some of this talent. We're not at the moment. It's migrating out. And many people will ask, we know of footballers in the early 2000s who migrated from Africa, watching an African who was playing in Europe, a village invested in him, and then that dangerous journey across the continent to the tip of the African continent to Europe, only to be held in a holding camp and then become radicalized. That is a fact. We have to retain the talent in Africa, which is why major events need to be hosted in Africa. I was there, I participated in the 2010 FIFA World Cup, the All Africa Games in 1999, Rugby World Cups, but the Commonwealth Games for 2022 was to be hosted in Durban. It wasn't. Birmingham stepped into the breach and filled the gap, but Africa still has to be able to host major games. We need an Olympic Games, Paralympic Games, we need the big events, and I believe Africa is ideally placed to do it differently. Once you have that, you have real sustainable impact. But the Sustainable Development Goals, a number of them extrapolated, use as a youth and community engagement model, a cultural framework, goals such as education, health, gender equality, safe communities, smart cities working in partnership, creates an ecosystem that sees that whole sport approach, socially, culturally, economically viable, with the type of socio-economic investment considerations, long-term investment, but having, well, where's the Sport for Development Fund? It's been talked about, but the social impact bonds, no one says what's the return and when do you want that return? I believe it's a never-ending, cyclical return. And we have enough sportsmen and women who have and create their own economics to be able to have this fund genuinely and authentically and with integrity, countering the other issue. It's always about governance, it's always about corruption. With all due respect, I do not believe that is eccentrically the purview of one continent. It's an excuse and it must be removed. If our talent can be extracted to the benefit of other continents, we can retain it and build the continent by way of the confidence and operational governance that sees investment long term.
Do we have any questions? I know it's scary, but you can ask questions.
There's no mic?
We can try. Yeah. Sorry. No way.
Just gonna project. So I'm a sportsman. I like to describe myself as such. I'm also a media marketing executive. I operate out of Lagos right now. With obviously designs to grow that operation in many different ways. So I've done some work with UNICEF, Global Citizen, or key partners of mine. One of the problems we've had, activations actually is what I should say, around social impact, sustainability, more practically around just ESG plays. We've struggled to onboard private sector involvement, and it's a real problem. Usually, the public sector, government officials or agencies are happy to endorse you, yeah? And more often than not, they grant you access to the case. But we've not really been able to, I want to use the word, develop a proper pipeline of, shall I say, sports meets sustainability type projects. And I'd like to learn more about how you guys are doing this and what sort of structures exist and how, what sort of opportunities to partner, obviously, on the ground.
What I learned a quarter of a century ago is there was a lot more willingness to work collaboratively. When you go to business have their sector interests and they will all come together in that common interest. I don't believe that Sport for Development has done so. I saw where the Office for Sport for Development was developed in the UN back in the early 2000s. The late Kofi Annan is to be credited also as a young sprinter of potential. He got it straight away. That office was established, but I think we lost some of the authenticity and the spirit of Ubuntu, which again was the South African culture, that we have to be the collective before we individually can realize our potential. What we now have is an ecosystem where I say it's an industry. There's too much third world doing to these communities and this talent, where they're quite honestly doing it to themselves now, and the communities are doing it to themselves. And that's where I believe you get social, cultural, economic sustainability. I think that's where the private sector, we do have family offices, we do have investment funds, because they are looking at football or soccer, depending on where you are, as the means by which that return can be realised. It has to start from a social grassroots development, performance and excellence pathway, because once those are the stars of their respective disciplines or games or environments, they bring back. In the English Premier League, some of the big names of the first generation of the Premier League, when the contracts were signed, there was a 10% socio-economic offset back to the club or the community they came from. I'd like to see something of that nature in sport for development. I'd like to see it in a fund. I'd like to see it properly managed against benchmarking, because for all of those who are going to invest, you need the long-term sustainability. The long-term sustainability is going to come from sport for development. But sport for development must reset, be more holistic, be more integrated. The UN agencies all compete. The recent UN Assembly, Secretary General made the declaration of sport for development, but it didn't have an engagement plan. It wasn't applicable within a framework and model against the Sustainable Development Goals. So I've consulted, and by the way, everything I present to you has been developed by young people, for young people, with young people, because they're going to outlive me. I'm in that latter part of legacy, yeah, later life. But what I'm saying is, young talent and potential are operating in what I call the second world. We've always talked about the first and the third world. They're operating in that second world, and they know how to navigate that geopolitical escalator. They're looking at the geopolitical shift of power in sport. It's interesting the Security Council, if reflected in the medals table of Paris, might suggest where the whole equilibrium lies. But sport for development must now reset. It cannot be about taking projects from their developing countries to Monaco to give them an award. With all due respect, so much for carbon net zero. And we've got the means, we've got the technology, we've got the YouTubes. Young people aren't watching television anymore. The rights companies need to recognize and remember that. This is their television, this is their vision, and they're interacting, communicating more than ever before. That's why we have to look at education differently. Education is 24/7. Traditional curriculums do not work. So Soccerwise, that Soccerwise education program pack, was inspired by a UK trade mission to Zambia, where the school was burned out, there was village conflict, and we were asked to go in and provide some diversionary activity. I remember the civil servant suggested. You're going into areas now where you have to know who the real sustainable presence is. I'm a self-invest mummy's boy. Women are the best return on this in this type of investment, and us boys play, provide, protect, and ensure if we're mummy's boys, we actually contribute to that whole community approach. But we started looking at it differently. UK trade missions started looking at whatever that 5% of GDP, but only 0.5% in Africa, contributes to that 5% GDP. Well, what does that represent to the World Bank? Where's the African Union in this? So I believe that business can always reset the dial. They can always bring to the table the sustainable long-term need of this proposition. And with all due respect, I got grey hairs and blood pressure from working with the institution. So it needs to be for the community, by the community, with the community. And I think the return is assured.
It cannot be a tick box.
Too many boxes are being ticked, and a youth culture generationally, Gen Z in particular, are just saying, we're just going to do our own thing. And they are doing their own thing. And they look at the NBA and the NFL and the UFC, the best return on investment are no facilities. I've always said the combat sports, karate, I just need a space and my magic begins. And we have to be mindful of that. Climate change, big facilities being built, now seeing people have to be more creative. Multi-sport stadiums are being built. Why not? Why do we need a stadium for football, a stadium for cricket? It won't work anymore.
It won't be used after the tournament.
Oh, well, the White Elephants, the London Legacy Development Corporation, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is still a regeneration master plan, but it's a 25-year journey. Manchester, it's been a 30-year journey. If you go to East Manchester now, you go to Manchester as a whole. They say it's like New York, but it takes a vision and it takes a sustainable commitment. But the whole funding mix comes, I believe, from the private sector, the investment in potential that sees a long-term return with short-term benchmarking that gives a justification for that return.
But also, what I find difficult because, I used to be in the corporate world and I gave up my career in corporate world to work for a charity called Alive and Kicking to create impact, right?
Well,
but then, my God, the last 2 years of my life have been the most challenging because I was in really comfortable life like most of you in your corporate. But then I thought I was a salesperson until I joined Alive and Kicking 2 years ago.
it's a combat sport.
Oh my God.
It's a combat sport.
Everybody's saying, oh, you're amazing. Yeah, I know, we are amazing. Like, okay, but if you really want us to create impact, we need your money and you need to believe in us. Because we are passionate people like him. I've never met someone like him. No, but it's true though. We need more people like him in the world. And yes, you're doing an amazing job in private sector, but you need to help him. You need to
but by the
help
way,
charities.
I don't want your charity, I want your investment.
No, investment.
This is a socio-economic investment.
This is not a CSR.
You're not doing me a favour here. I decided that the Youth Charter would be distinct from that charitable beg.
Yeah.
This is a socio-economic investment, a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
You'll get a return on your investment when they're performing at the highest level, the brand sponsorship and everything that goes with it. But they're the ones that from the streets have inspired the streets, who have the ambition to want to buy the brands that they will promote. If they haven't got the means by which to do that, they're coming to you. They're not coming to me. Karate Kids looked out for them. What's going to be your answer? What's going to be your excuse? There is a need for a reset because sport for development has become an industry. Therefore, it must align now. What is the package? What is the product? The product primarily is the asset. The asset is the talent pool. The talent and potential comes from our streets. Therefore, we've got to look at it in the round. And whenever we say there's one performing, there needs to be 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10 benefiting. Then you've got what I call equity before equality. That equity piece we're not discussing, so equality can never not be realized. Gender empowerment, again, if we reflect society, it's represented in sport. That's why the Billie Jean King Cup is so important. I was inspired by that generational, just people making and affecting change, because that was my motivation when I competed. I get to the semi-finals, and that's more difficult than the final. The semi-finals is where you understand why you're there and what you represent. And it's then that you know you've come from somewhere and you're going back to somewhere. Going to the barber shop, what happened? I lost. Don't do it again. Go out and get it right next time. There's a reality of language we need to understand. So charity, I believe, is for those who need charity. This young talent are raw, they have potential, they have hunger, they have desire, and I believe if you channel it and use it within a holistic ecosystem that says you don't have to migrate to Europe in order to realize your potential, you can do it in your community, with your community, in your country, on your continent.
And sport is the best industry for that.
There's no other more powerful convening power, more
Exactly.
nation participation and membership of FIFA than the United Nations. Do you all go to the World Bank? Has the World Bank ever convened you? Do you all come together? I don't know what's the economic value and worth convened here today. Should we be putting a 2% legacy levy on all major games? That'd be an interesting proposition. Why not? Why are we not recruiting, selecting, deploying millions of social coaches? The late great Muhammad Ali gave 2 hours every day of his existence, which nobody knew about. He'd just turn up at someone's door, knock, hey, I'm Muhammad Ali, and he'd sit and he'd watch television and literally inspire greatness. That 2 hours of any coach, I had nobody that was paid to coach me, nobody. They saw my potential and they gave me an opportunity to realize my potential. That's why the social coaches come from all over the world. They are the people who develop trust, confidence, and respect. And if that feeds into a campus of multi-agency stakeholding, if I'm in Nigeria, I went to Lagos University.
Last week?
No, this is many years back. The most intimidating environment of absolute talent I've ever encountered. It was everywhere. And this is why I'm saying it's a powerful, powerful proposition. And if we get that base right, every return on investment, I almost very rarely say is guaranteed. You can't lose with this.
No. Any questions from the audience? Yes?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I'm Badara Jeng from Gambia. I'm a basketball coach, and we are more into youth basketball development for Project Gambia. So what we do is we nurture these kids through basketball skills and their education. So some of them have scholarship and are in US because one of them is in Florida State University, FSU, on a scholarship. But the problem is, like, not all of them make it to that level. So when you're 18 years, you have to graduate from the program. You started from 6 to 16. When you're 18, you graduate. So through your experience, what can you advise us to those ones who didn't have the scholarship or to go to the next level? What can we create for them? So that if they don't make it to basketball, what other options is there for them?
Employability, entrepreneurship, it has to be. Every world champion, every gold medalist, every professional represents 1 million of that participating aspiration. And that's why we cannot just see this as the return that is seen at the tip of that iceberg. Underneath, there is a massive, massive participation ambition, and we're seeing instances even in the English Premier League academies. The dropout goes back to the streets, even more disaffected than they were when they entered into the experience, and they then become very much seductive to the lifestyle of the streets. The Arthur Ashe legacy, I'm sorry, I'm inspired by the generation that you see me sit before you here today. He was very much the scholar athlete. My second son has just returned, he's returned after a 5-year tennis scholarship in the United States. But he knew where he was going on the basis of the one thing I said that is guaranteed in sport. If you make it, you will get injured. The nature of the injury will depend on the risk that you invest in and then indemnify, and then it creates its own system because you mitigate that risk of your investment. If a career is life-threatening, career-threatening, in whatever end, the investment is covered. I think we have to give, especially those who go to a college sporting experience, we all know the grades are never the expected level of the sporting participation. I completely advocate they must have a career alternative. They're still going to be able to need to read their contracts. They're still going to need to be able to present themselves in front of the media. They're still going to need to be able to understand the demands that life presents to them. So there are transferable skills that I believe are absolutely required. No single competitor should be there thinking that they're going to be able to play out their careers, make the fortune, and lose the money before they have. Anyone watch? I haven't watched it yet, but I think there's a very, very salutary reality check of the last week where we had the man who represented the streets in Mike Tyson fight Jake Paul. There's a lot of lessons there learning if we wish to really understand the nature of the ecosystem of sport. I refuse to watch it. I'm a traditionalist, I'm old-fashioned. I'm too set in my ways. But I'm aware of what it represents and what it means, and we need to be alive and alert to that.
Yeah.
Hi. Touching on the question that was asked, and we do similar work in regards to engaging young people, upskilling them, trying to get them jobs, using sports as a tool and a workforce. The reality is, regardless of the sport you participate in, not everyone is going to make it to an elite level. That's just the reality of it. Not every business we also work with can just magically give some of our young people opportunities. If you are working both here in the United Kingdom, and I work primarily in Lagos, Nigeria as well, if the education aspect isn't there, but we are able to get people at least a basic level of maths and English, we understand where we are developing a mindset and a change, but when reality kicks in, I still need to eat, I still need to pay my bills, I still may need to provide for my family. Now, I've come from a background where this wasn't always the field I was in. I got in trouble growing up, and it took some time for me to realize my potential. If I didn't have a strong family unit, and at least based on my parents doing the right things, buying their property, degree holders and stuff like that, I would fall into a trap again, whereby irrespective of my intentions, my reality is I do need to eat. There are social elements where I still want to remain friends with people, I still want to go out, I still want to be a provider. So if you're not able to get funding or investment, and again, we're not looking for charity, it is a business at the end of the day, you have the kind of, it's a reality check. Some of these people will fall through the cracks if certain things aren't in place, and you can't just magically create opportunities for those that don't make it, although we upskilled them. So there's a grey area, and I guess my question is, what suggestion, advice, or based on that, any thoughts?
When I made reference to that schoolboy Benji Stanley, I genuinely thought that would be the only life lost. I never believed it would become my life's work. I genuinely believed that there was an economic, social and cultural sense to gainfully employing potential that would allow it to become disaffected And that's why I mentioned the word poverty. You talk about poverty, you talk about gangs, you talk about radicalized. These are people who have not had the chance. And I've seen far too many. When I make the argument about it being an investment, it's actually about insurance. It's actually about some long-term risk being mitigated. As we look across the global landscape, youth culture is very much drawn to things that would see them curious and wanting to push boundaries. We all have, hopefully, some experience of those boundaries we pushed, if we're prepared to remember. The pressures now on youth culture is that the news and the information is immediate. That's cerebral. What they take in is what they want to live out. And it's worth noting, if they want to buy a pair of sneakers, it's going to part when they're over £250. They're not going to get that with a part-time job or flipping burgers. They want the lifestyle of those that have come from the streets and now being used to promote and market the brands to those on the streets. There's a reality check here. So we've got to find a new ecosystem. And equally, as I say, sport is not the panacea. But when we had those games in Paris, that's why I say, give me 10% of that for a community campus, and we will be good. It's never going to be perfect. The traditional journey from education to an apprenticeship to hopefully university. We've got students leaving university and they've not got a degree in common sense. By the way, I'm looking for that to be an actually included part of the curriculum. And people look at me and go, what does that mean? It's worth noting. What I'm saying is the streets are savvy. It is the most informed, it is the most intelligent, it is the most hungry, it is the most creative generation that we will have encountered. 2011, that Arab Spring, told us what the global youth culture was capable of with technology. And that's why we say interactively active, but actively interactive suggests it is hard work. Their patience levels are not there anymore. But that's why, like Live and Kicking, that was the legacy of 1999 Women's World Cup in Los Angeles. I've seen the journey. There are too many of us agencies who believe that it is, that the top end of it, the strength and depth of it is hard work. It is significantly hard work because we've not made the ask understandable or clearable. However, whenever the University of Crime becomes their chosen path, that has a negative impact on every single one of us. That is why there is a return on investment, societally and within the sporting ecosystem. So that there can't be an excuse as to why the one continent that has provided so much for the other continents cannot now see some of that go back to the continent to the benefit of the continent, because the geopolitical landscape is becoming an interesting one. We've got to stop.
We need to stop, sorry, but you can continue the conversation.